All right, let's jump right in. We're looking at a huge geopolitical chess match here. On one side, you've got the United States, a superpower that really wants to end a war. But on the other side? Well, according to this analysis we're digging into, Iran is the one holding all the cards, deciding if and when this thing is actually over. So, what really happens when a superpower finds itself in a war it just can't end? I mean, think about that. It completely flips the usual script on its head. And according to the analysis we're looking at today, this isn't some hypothetical scenario. It's the stark reality the US is staring down right now. So here's the core idea from this analysis. The US is desperately searching for an exit ramp, right? A way to get out of this conflict. But Iran, they've basically turned that exit into a brick wall. They've seized the initiative, and now any attempt by the US to just pack up and leave, well, it's become a strategic nightmare, a total dead end. So how on earth did we get here? Let's break down the mechanics of how Iran, according to this deep dive, has managed to completely take control, essentially taking the end war button right out of America's hands. You know, in most situations, a country like the US could just say, all right, we're done, declare a ceasefire, pull out, and call it a day. Simple, right? Well, not this time. The analysis we're following argues that Iran has totally flipped that script. They've made it crystal clear. This war ends on their terms, and their terms only. Okay, so what are those terms? What's the price tag for the US to get that exit they so badly want? Well, let's just say the list of demands is steep. And from what this analysis says, these aren't suggestions. They're non-negotiable. So this analysis breaks it down to 3 official non-negotiable conditions laid out by Iran's supreme leader. The first one? It's a doozy. Massive, and I mean massive war reparations. And look, these aren't just some vague, symbolic demands. Oh no, the source gets really specific. Iran is putting a bill on the table for concrete, high-value assets. We're talking destroyed oil reservoirs, their entire civilian aircraft fleet being grounded, plus heavy damage to critical infrastructure like the main airport in Tehran. And if you thought they were just asking nicely, think again. This next part really drives home how serious this is. The analysis points to a direct quote coming from Khamenei's office, and it's basically a threat. It's not a request for payment, it's a promise of collection. So you might be wondering, how exactly could they collect on something like that? Well, Iran believes it has a couple of very powerful levers to pull. First, they could just start imposing their own tariffs on every single ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. You know, only the world's most important oil choke point. Or, and this is even more direct, they could just lean on their vulnerable Gulf neighbors and basically say, you're going to pay America's bill for them. This whole situation basically forces the United States into what this analysis calls an unwinnable choice. It's an impossible dilemma, right? 2 paths forward, and both of them look pretty catastrophic. And this really is the strategic checkmate. Let's break it down. Option 1, you withdraw without a clear victory. What happens then? Well, US global deterrence, that is, the thing that makes other countries think twice before starting something, it shatters. Suddenly, rivals like Russia and China are emboldened, thinking America has lost its nerve. Then there's option 2, escalate. But that means a massive ground invasion, a potential 20-year occupation, which politically and logistically is just seen as impossible for the US to pull off. And for America's allies in the Gulf, that first option is an absolute nightmare. The analysis is really clear on this. Without that US security guarantee, that umbrella, a super confident Iran would be free to bully, extort, and attack its neighbors at will. The source literally calls them prey. They'd be completely exposed. But hold on, because the pressure doesn't stop there. According to this analysis, Iran is holding another card up its sleeve, a really powerful one that it hasn't even fully played yet. And this move, it could send the entire global economy into a tailspin. So, what is this ace in the hole? It's the Houthis in Yemen. Now, the analysis here frames them as more than just a proxy force. They're presented as Iran's ultimate strategic asset, just held in reserve, waiting for the moment they can cause maximum chaos on the world stage. And this isn't just some theory, okay? The source points out a really critical fact. The US has already tried and failed to secure the Bab al-Mandab Strait from Houthi attacks before. So there's a history here, and it highlights a major American vulnerability in one of the most important waterways on the planet. So, what happens if Iran decides to play this Houthi card? Well, if they manage to close the Bab al-Mandab Strait, that would shut down a huge export route for Saudi Arabia. The analysis projects this would trigger a secondary oil shock, potentially sending prices rocketing to $150 a barrel. And you better believe we'd all feel that at the pump. And here's the kicker. This potential price shock would come at the absolute worst possible time for the United States. The country's emergency oil supply, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, is already running low. What's more, the analysis notes that the actual salt caverns underground where the oil is stored are physically damaged from overuse and need major maintenance. That makes it a lot harder to get to the oil, even if it's there. So where does this all lead? What's the end game? If this analysis is on the money, the end of this conflict isn't going to be a simple return to how things were before. No, we're talking about a fundamental, permanent shift in the entire balance of power across the Middle East. The new reality this source paints is pretty stark. You have a United States whose credibility is just shattered. You have an Iran that's more aggressive and more dominant than ever. The Gulf nations, they're left totally vulnerable. And Iran's demands don't stop at reparations. They grow to include kicking all U.S. military bases off their soil, effectively erasing decades of American influence in the region. And that brings us to the final, really sobering question this analysis leaves us with. In this high-stakes game between nations, when a major strategic miscalculation is made, who's the one that ultimately pays the price? It's a question that echoes way beyond the Middle East, and it really leaves you wondering, what's the next move in this dangerous game going to be?